Hey guys, this is Cody with Pool Parts to Go. Today we're going to be taking apart one of the BLACK+DECKER Inground variable speed pumps to change the impeller and the mechanical seal on it. This is likely going to be one of the first repair jobs that your pump may need as time goes on, because that mechanical seal is a wear item and is something that over time does need to be replaced from here and there. So the tools we're going to need today are going to be a couple of wrenches, 9/16 and 5/8, some pliers, screwdrivers, Phillips. I have both a Phillips 1 and a Phillips 2. Something to test for voltage, very important. And then of course our new impeller and our new mechanical seal. We want to start by removing the 8 housing bolts around the pump itself. And this is done with the 9/16. And just to note, the 2 top bolts you won't be able to completely remove. You'll be able to loosen them where they move freely, but they are going to stay in place due to the driver. With all 8 housing bolts removed, we can now pull back on the motor and separate the motor assembly from the housing. From here, the next step we want to do is to remove the diffuser of the pump, and that is done with a Phillips 1 screwdriver. And this can be set aside. Now, to remove the impeller, we need to be able to grab the shaft of the motor to unthread the impeller from it. So what I like to do is to tip the motor up, and I want to remove the fan cover, which is done with a Phillips 2 screwdriver. And there are 3 screws. One here, and the one at the bottom. And with that fan shroud removed, we can now set the pump back down. The impeller, as you can see, the impeller and the fan spin together. So what we need to do is hold the fan steady and then apply force to the impeller to unthread it. Same righty-tighty, lefty-loosey as everything else. So while holding the fan, put your other hand on the impeller and give it just a little bit of a twist. And there we go, that's the impeller. Now the impellers, if the pump's been ran dry or the impeller's taken damage, this little shaft here that actually slips over the shaft of the motor can become warped or deformed, or it'll kind of mushroom out. If yours has any sign like that, you definitely want to replace the impeller with your mechanical seal to stop any sort of pump seal leak while you're at it. And then the mechanical seal itself is actually a 2-part seal. There's the part that goes on the impeller, and then the part that goes inside of the seal plate of the pump. Those are, again, a 2-part seal. To get the one that's part of the seal plate out, we do want to remove the seal plate from the motor itself. So we do that by taking a 5/8 wrench and removing the 4 motor bolts. To get that part of the seal out of the seal plate itself, what I find easy is to set the seal plate down, face down, and take a small screwdriver or something like that. Just give it a little bit of a tap. And it pops right out. All right guys, now that we got everything taken apart, we're ready to put the pump back together with the new components. On the mechanical seal, something to be aware of and to be careful of is this white part, and then this thin part of this spring-loaded half of the seal. Those are made of ceramic. You want to be very, very careful not to get any skin oil or anything like that on them. And if you do, just wipe them off with a lint-free towel to clean them back up before you finish assembly. So we want to start by putting the flat part of the mechanical seal into our seal plate. You want to take a little bit of a silicone and or Teflon based lubricant, just nothing petroleum based, so no Vaseline or anything like that. We want to carefully put that on the outside of this without touching the ceramic portion. Set that inside of our seal plate, and then again, to keep it from to keep any oil or skin oil from getting on it, you want to use a clean towel to press that down into place, and it just goes straight down. And you can see how it's nice and flush in there. And if we flip it over and spin it around, you can see that there's no gap between the seal and the bottom, kind of the cup of the seal plate as we look at that. For the other half of the seal, we want to take a little bit of lubricant, and I like to put just a touch around the impeller to help it slide on easier. And this guy, we can just start it on and it slides straight down and on. Now to put the pump itself back together, we want to start by taking one of our 9/16 bolts, and if they got separated, we have the bolt, we have a flat washer, and we have a lock washer, which is the one that's kind of split. You want to have the split one against the head of the bolt and then the flat one underneath it. As we tighten it down, those two will squeeze together and then close the gap of the lock washer. But we want to go ahead and put 2 of these on. And we still have the 2 bolts from the motor bolts, the 5/8 ones right there. And we can go ahead and lift this up and set this onto the motor. And we can start threading on the motor bolts. And if y'all remember, these are the 5/8. And these guys, we want to get them nice and tight, but they're not lug nuts on your car. You don't need to go too crazy. We want to make sure that that lock washer is nice and flattened out, and then just a good hand tight for the rest of it. Now we can reinstall our impeller. And this kind of slips out. The front shaft of the impeller will actually go between the shaft of the motor and the seal we installed a moment ago. And that just threads on. You want to hold the fan in the back while you screw it on. And then you'll start to feel some resistance. That's that spring compressing from the impeller side of the seal. And just nice and firm hand tight with both hands. And there we go. That's the impeller. That's the whole reason we took this guy apart now. To do the fan shroud, I'm going to tip this guy up on its nose. You have to kind of wiggle it around a little bit, but you can see where the threads are for the screws to go in. And that's that. We do want to spin the impeller, make sure everything spins nice and freely. You don't want to feel any rubbing resistance. If there is, just take the fan cover back off and see if you can identify where it's coming from. And then we can go ahead and put our diffuser on. Now we have the 2 screws, and on these you can see where 2 of them are a little bit skinnier, and you can see the threads where the screws were before. This guy has little pegs that line up and the little notches all the way around. Make sure the screws get where they need to be, and the rest of the pegs just kind of line right up. And again, just make sure the impeller spins nice and freely for everything. We have 2 O-rings that we need to reassemble everything. If it's been a few years since your pump was apart, it's good to replace these while you have it opened up. You already have it apart, they're ready to go. I'd order them with the seal and the impeller. I'm going to put a little bit of that silicone lube on them. And you don't need to gob it on real thick. You just want the O-ring to look nice and shiny. And that should be plenty. And this guy has a groove all the way around for it. And the little one goes right on the nose of the diffuser. And we're ready to reinstall this all to the housing. Now this is probably still attached to your plumbing. If you did install the pump with the included unions, it's completely acceptable to unscrew the unions and take this whole pump onto a workbench, onto the back of a truck, just whatever's easiest and most convenient for you to work on it. Those unions are there for servicing for things like this, so please don't be scared to take them apart and use them. This slides right in, and we can start putting our housing bolts back in. And just like with the motor bolts, we want these nice and tight, a good hand tight, but you don't need to be torquing down real hard on these. You want to make sure that that split washer gets completely flattened out, and then just, again, a good firm hand tight from there. And there you go. That's how to replace the impeller and the mechanical seal in your Black & Decker variable speed pump.